Will, it's
Yes.
another episode of Wheelsboy Chat,
Yes.
where we are going to sit here and we're going to talk about a topic related to the Chinese car market.
Yes.
Yes.
Makes sense. That's not what we normally do.
Normally we do car reviews. Yeah.
Yes.
And we are going to, in this case, our main topic for today's video is going to be, I don't know about you, but a lot of my videos get comments saying, boy, these Chinese cars are cool, but man, are their names crazy or ridiculous, or I can't pronounce them, what's going on?
Well, you get more comments than I do, so.
Not for long.
But I did recently run a poll on Twitter about a certain company's name, and yeah, there's a lot of. I think the naming with Chinese car brands is somewhat of a not a problem because some do it well, but it's a mixed bag for sure, right?
So the question is, when these Chinese brands go abroad, which they are doing at an increasing rate, how do they deal with the names? Do they keep their names, their Chinese names? Do they use Chinese characters? I would add another thing. Do they use Chinese characters on the car? Okay, well there you go. Did they use the what they call the pinyin, which is the English letters that represent the Chinese characters? They put that on the car, and so I think we don't have to go through every single brand.
Sure.
But I would start by saying there are, as you said, it's case by case. There's definitely a lot of brands that absolutely can't do it.
Yes.
So I'll put one out there for you, Fangchengbao.
Yes. Well, right. There's a few things. Right. There's a few things. Number one, right. Pinyin. Okay. Yes, it uses English letters, but it doesn't use English sounds.
Right. The pronunciation is not the same.
Right. Because you have the old way. I think called Giles Wade. I'm not sure where it uses English sounds. So like when you used to have like Qingdao, you know Qingdao in Pinyin is QINGDAO.
In Pinyin.
In Pinyin, but in the old style, it's TSI for that ch sound.
Right.
So
Peking.
Yes. So
Peking,
arguably that would be better because then you might give a chance to people abroad to actually be able to pronounce it.
True. Hard sell.
But even still, I think it's difficult.
So, like in the case with Fangchengbao, I think a good rule of thumb to start with is the more characters are in your name, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to get away with using that name in what we call pinyin.
It's not catchy in most cases.
It's not. So like the Fangchengbao, that's actually Fangchengbao. It's 3 characters. And it means formula leopard, however you want to translate it. But that's a whole heck of a lot of words to put in the back of a car.
Yes.
It looks ridiculous
yes.
in English. It's also really difficult for people to pronounce.
And the translation doesn't really make any sense.
And the translation is weird. So there are brands, however, there's obvious examples. Let's go with the easy examples of ones that could go abroad or are abroad already using their quote Chinese name. For example, like BYD.
Yeah, BYD is 3 letters. BMW. I mean, acronym. GM. GMC, right? That was
GMC.
Right? So like with this, you can't go wrong because people know what letters are, right? So this is fine.
I should clarify. I did say that BYD was their Chinese name. Technically, their Chinese name is BYD.
Yes.
BYD. Oh God, the tones. Anyways, the point is but here in China, they use BYD badging and stuff, and so it's relatively consistent across different markets.
And by the way, no one actually likes what they decided was the name, which is Build Your Dreams.
Oh, it's terrible.
Right. That goes back to the idea, I think, in China and I think in the West sometimes as well, where you use English words because it's quote unquote cool, right?
Yeah. I mean, I do think there's been recently in China a pushback against the fact that for decades something was considered more high-end, better made, all these things. There was a certain amount of prestige associated with putting English names and English words onto things.
Yes.
It's why you still to this day see people running around in China with sweatshirts that have what looks to a native English speaker as gibberish words on it.
Gibberish words, random words that shouldn't be on T-shirts as well.
Absolutely. The audience can Google that if they want to look at some of those. But there's a certain amount of prestige coming. But there's been a pushback where people are now within China, and I can understand why this is, to say like, hey, look, we got Chinese, we're proud of Chinese, we'll make a concession. Obviously, a lot of foreigners don't understand Chinese characters. Well, they're gonna have to suck it up and learn pinyin.
Yeah, and that's fine as long as you're prepared for the rest of the world to butcher that pronunciation, right?
Absolutely murder. Let's talk about, I mean, just as an example, recently I'm listening to different car podcasts, and I'm overall glad about the fact that people outside of China are reporting on what's happening within the Chinese car industry. Thanks for catching up, everybody. But to hear people like Xiaomi, the Xiaomi SU7,
Yes.
to hear people try to pronounce Xiaomi is XI, it's XI.
Like Xiaomi and
Yeah.
Xiaomi and yeah.
Oh, Zomi, and it's both unfair of me to judge these people for not being able to pronounce it because it is. I struggled for a long time to learn
They don't know Chinese, right? So
they don't know Chinese, but also I cannot pretend that it doesn't absolutely make me want to put my fist through a mirror.
Yes.
But the other thing is with this Xiaomi, their latest model, the SU7, or in China they call it the Suqi, Su like SU, and then
like
Qi.
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, is that his name in China?
No.
Su. Oh, the name. Oh, yeah.
7.
His
number.
sound.
Yeah.
So they call it the Su Qi meaning 7 in Chinese, and for some reason, some media outside of the country have been, instead of just calling it the SU7 or the Su7, they have been adopting the Chinese pronunciation of it, and so they said it sounds. They said sushi. So I heard someone say that it was the Xiaomi sushi, and I was like, oh God.
It's because I mean, to be honest, like I regularly, so in Changsha there's a river, it's the Shangjiang, but for, you will hear people all the time call it the Shangjiang River, which basically means the Shang River. And this is just because, I don't know, people just get used to it, or in the early days, before you could speak Chinese, you just get introduced to this place and someone goes, that's the Shangjiang. And you're like, oh, okay, that must be the Shangjiang River. And then later on you find out that Shang means river, right?
Right.
So,
There's a certain argument to be made, and I can understand, I know from what people told me within certain companies that there are higher ups who basically say, hey, look, we're Chinese, we're gonna use a Chinese name, and you guys can suck it up, and we're still gonna dominate the market. And so I know that there was allegedly an edict that came down from on high over at BYD from the tippity top saying, hey, when we go abroad, we're not changing our names anymore. Now, there's some reasons specifically that BYD would not want to change their name because they've already got a very, very, very confusing naming structure for their models.
Yeah.
And they already have domestic distributors and stuff in places like Australia who essentially, as far as I'm aware, from what I've heard from the Chinese side, kind of on their own decided.
Changed the name.
They basically said.
That's where the Atto 3 came from that Australian.
Exactly, Atto. They said like, we're not going to call it the BYD Yuan Plus. We're not going to call it the BYD Seal. We're going to call it, or the Dolphin is the Atto. Is that the Atto 2, right?
Yeah, but they never called it. They never called it the Atto 2 in the end.
Right.
They called it the Dolphin. Yes.
Probably because BYD finally cracked down on that. But they don't want to be led around by their distributors, so they're like, it's.
But the problem is they didn't make that decision until later. So they allowed it with the Atto 3. They then imported the UM Plus into the UK and continue to call it the Atto 3. And now they're sending over the Seal and the Seal U. So
right. Yeah, so now it's not any Atto. The Atto whole thing is.
And this is what happens specifically with BYD is they start something and then halfway through they change it and
Yes.
they just go, we'll just keep what we've done, right? And we'll just move along. So, first of all, it was, all the sea animals were all going to be EV only. And then the Navy boats were going to be the DMI, the hybrid ones, right?
If anyone in the audience is confused when you say the sea animals and the Navy boats, you're not making that up. I mean, like, that's the.
What do you mean? They're all ocean. Very, very
right.
self-explanatory.
The overall ocean family, which is some animals, but also some battleships and
then
cruise.
like seagulls. It's like, okay, I guess it's a kind of an ocean animal, but it's not really. Because the reason why they did that is because we know in Chinese they all start with Hi.
Hi. Yes.
Right.
Oh,
So
yeah,
this is
yeah.
why, right?
I blanked so hard on that. I did not pass that test. You were like, we all know, and I went, yes, we do.
Yeah.
That, and then no, I didn't.
So that's why they did that. But in English, it just seems like a very random selection of animals in or around the sea.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then the battleships, like the destroyer, was a destroyer 05.
Yes.
And then they went, no, now it's the SEAL DMI.
But they still sell the Destroyer 05, I think.
Yeah.
So it's a Seal, pure EV.
Yes.
A Seal DMI,
Yes.
which is a totally different platform
Yes.
with different exterior styling.
Yes.
And then also it's the Chu whatever Jin. I'm sorry, I can't remember the Battleship
Yes.
05,
And then
which is the
SEAL,
same.
SEAL U that comes from the Dynasty, really, because it's.
I'm not done yet because underneath it, I'm pretty sure. So the Seal DMI has its own platform that I believe it shares with the 05 or 07. I can't remember. But then there's also like a lot of crossover with the Qin Plus, which is smaller. But the point is, it is a mess, and that's what the best advice that I could give to any Chinese automaker at this point. And I think that's what they should take away from this. If there's anybody from a Chinese automaker watching this, it almost doesn't matter what you call it.
Yeah.
Just pick a name.
Be consistent with it.
Exactly.
Right.
Think about, there's some great examples of like Hyundai or Hyundai.
Hyundai.
Or, yes, whatever. And so the point is, when they reached foreign markets, we both know that they were, I'm sure there were people being like, what in the world is a Hyundai? Or how are they? Hyundai or whatever.
Yes.
And you know what? Do you know, there are not that many different ways that people pronounce Hyundai now.
Yes, it's
They
definitely.
figured it out.
But like the British export Jaguar to a foreign country, and the Americans still can't pronounce it properly. So.
Jaguar.
Yeah. So like names are hard, right? But that's BYD's particular situation is something that, because they have so many cars and been going on for so long, it's just become a complicated mess. It's kind of like a knot that's now very difficult to untangle. But going forwards for other cars that haven't gone abroad, right, there are a couple of different ways. So like Chang'an, not Chang'an, Changchun, and then was Great Wall.
Yes, Chongqing, yeah.
That's what they first exported as, and then Great Wall Motors now GWM. Right, which is, you can never go wrong, as we said before, with 3 letters or...
The acronyms.
Yeah.
Acronyms are great because acronyms, I think one of the most important things to keep in mind, one is consistency. 2 is just pay enough attention to know that I know you can't have a name that works in every single market, but you have to be able to say, an example, the Wang brand, right, which is BYD's top. We keep picking on BYD, but they're not alone here. Top brand, right? That brand that was one of the ones that I got the most comments about on the channel, saying, this name is crazy. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this name. I don't understand it. And part of me says, like, that's just you don't speak Chinese. You know, you need to. It's not their names aren't weird.
Yes.
It's just you don't speak Chinese.
Yes. Right.
And so that's not. It's just because you don't speak the language doesn't mean it's weird. But if you're gonna take it abroad as opinion, you have to keep in mind that like that is going to be called Young Wang.
Yes.
It's going to almost be called Young Wang, and you do not want your car brand to be called Young Wang.
Yes, no, it's not exactly.
And if anybody watching was thinking like, does nobody have any concept that Wang means wiener, genital parts, in at least the U.S. and other places? And the answer is, from the people that I've spoken to, no.
Yeah, because it depends on the different car companies. Are they using Europeans or Americans to focus group? And say Europeans is a broad thing, because if you're launching your car into Scandinavia, testing a quote unquote English name, it's probably better that you test it in a English speaking country first.
Right.
And you're going to need to make sure that when you move into certain countries that names don't have different meanings that might be bad for you, right?
Right.
Not all car names are great, even by Western standards. So, for instance, the Ford Fiesta it's a name that's very long, right, in history, but it literally means the Ford Spanish Party, right? Like,
but it's alliterating. It's alliteration. It's great.
yes, it's nice. But you know, or the Ford Focus, which is like the Ford Concentrate, right? Obviously, Ford Focus works better than the Ford Concentrate, but you know, when you break it down, like the meaning of the names is less important. And I think sometimes the Chinese they love good meaning to a name.
And Chinese allows for you to express, I think, more meaning in these things. Like again, these names we could come with Yang Wang. It means to look up, right? Metaphorically speaking, you look up to something or whatever, to look up
stars.
To. Yes, and it's great. And then some names, Fangchengbao is not very great in Chinese, as far as I know either.
No, I don't know. I don't understand that.
So, anyways, like. My advice to them would be, like you said, it's consistency. It's making sure that you don't have a name that is very, very obviously going to be a laughingstock. That you're going to have to. You're already starting from less than zero in certain cases because of the reputation that Chinese brands have in Chinese products.
Yes.
So do not make it harder on yourself.
Yes. On topic now, the big news is obviously Neo.
Yes.
And Neo's new brand. Right.
Which everyone was, it was the code name was Alps.
Yes.
And if they'd actually been able to call it Alps, would have been awesome. But
yes.
There's no way in hell somebody hasn't already copyrighted that.
So they went with the name Onvo, O-N-V-O, which is obviously a made-up word, but so is Neo.
Right.
But
at least Neo is... It's just N-I-O, but it's N-E-O. It's new.
Yes.
It's like, and it's easy to pronounce and everything.
Yes.
Onvo, like envoy?
I don't know. The Chinese name is Le Dao, right? It's the happy road.
Yeah, Le Dao.
Which, you know, fine. But
I don't know. I have to ask my Chinese friends about whether they think that's any good.
Yeah. So I again on Twitter ran a poll and said, you know, do you prefer the name Alps or Onvo? And
well, that's
the name Alps,
really.
But the comments on it were quite funny, like of what people said they thought Onvo made them feel like. One of them was like a electrical appliance company that might make washing machines or something like that. And you wonder where or how they got this name.
Didn't somebody say that it sounded like some sort of like hormone replacement, estrogen?
Yes, like an estrogen pill. Yes,
estrogen replacement pill.
So it's one of the things like how they're testing it, how they're coming up with it. Are they just doing it internally? I don't know.
Right.
That's the answer.
And now that these Chinese brands are thinking more globally, they have to think like global brands because look, if General Motors tried to make their name General Motors now, it wouldn't work. If anybody tried to, all these brands that have these established names tried to make their name that, they would never be able to get a global copyright. And so they have to go to these kind of like weirdo, sometimes made up names or like Latin and stuff.
But just because it's made up doesn't mean that it's good, right? Like it's
no.
I would argue like, almost harder to make a made up word that might sound good, right? So.
Well, because you don't have the advantage of having the cultural, not necessarily in a positive way, the weight or the significance or the ability to understand what's trying to be said by something if you can connect it to a word you already know.
But on the flip side, in 20 years, will anybody care?
And the answer is, we'll find out in 20 years. All right, I think that's going to be enough for today. But we really ought to start charging for this. We should really be charging for this because if there's any Chinese car makers watching this, they're going like, if they're smart, they're going.
Yes. Ask foreigners what to call name brand. Make sure it's not rude in another country.
Oh my God. Yeah. All right, well, that'll do for now. If anybody watching has any comments or anything about what we talked about or wants to hear us talk about another topic, I hope they will let us know in the comments below. But either way, I'll see you on the next episode.
See you soon.
All right.